even though I definitely know I had serious physical health problems that needed to be addressed, looking at the mind body side of things was really helpful as well. And so I've learned to combine all those aspects and look into every aspect of health. And after over the next year or so, I gave up on seeing doctors because I was only getting worse. And it was really, it was pretty horrific actually to go from, a very healthy, functioning young woman to suddenly bedridden. And I was seeing every doctor and natural practitioner that I could. I nearly died, and I spent about a week in hospital, and again they were just telling me it was anxiety. And then there's so many of us who have all these chronic illnesses, and it doesn't really matter um, what the disease or illness is. The underlying problem is the immune function and the body being able to detox and get rid of pathogens. And so to protect our immune system without interfering with it is such an important thing. So 4 years in total, I had some really severe Lyme disease symptoms without any relief, apart from I just kept on doing the liver
Yep.
cleansing. I found Holder Clark's book, and I thought everything that she talks about, the basic simple things of liver cleansing, kidney cleansing, killing parasites, viruses and bacteria, and removing toxins. Yes, I started to learn the internet was coming in more, and more. I was going on to support groups more, and then I learned about Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, and he specialises in Lyme disease over in Europe. And anyway, and I listened to everything he was saying, and I thought, that's exactly what my symptoms are. And I'd had so many tests for Lyme disease here in Australia, and they all kept coming back negative. Anyway, and so I started researching more about Lyme, and I found a molecular biologist who was also a homeopath, homeopath nutritionist and herbalist in the States, and had phone consultations. And I actually started to get some real relief from proper treatment for Lyme disease. And then I started to become involved with the Lyme Disease Association of Australia. And I started to see that there was hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people around Australia who had all these symptoms and illness that just weren't getting treatment. And they were both veterinarians, and they'd been given $1 million grant to study tick-borne illness in cattle. And he said to me, I've seen Lyme bacteria under the microscope. And he said the reason why it's not coming up positive in the testing that they're doing here in Australia is because they're using the ELISA test, which tests for antibodies. But Lyme disease suppresses the immune system, so we don't produce antibodies. And he said he went to all the health departments. He spoke to so many heads of immunology and parasitology and all the rest, and no one wanted to listen to him. And so tragically, his wife never got the treatment that she needed. So usually if you take an antibiotic or a herbal treatment to kill Lyme disease, you have a reaction in your body when it's being killed off. I was having a reaction when I went into the sun, because the role of the GCMF protein in our body is to upload vitamin D and activate our macrophages, a form of white blood cell. And so within 15 minutes of being in the sun, I was having a Herxheimer reaction because my own immune system was being activated.
Wow, beautiful.
It was incredible. And I was just like, wow, bring it on. Give it to me. And what I learned about the GCMAF, it's high in colostrum, the mother's first milk, mammalian milk. And there was a company who were making yogurt and making this yogurt GCMAF, really high GCMAF yogurt. And I thought, well, surely we can make it ourselves. Dr. Joe McCord, he worked with a team of doctors to work out how they can remove or help our own body to activate the antioxidants and remove oxidative stress. And they came up with this mixture of bacopa, ashwagandha, milk thistle, green tea, and turmeric, maybe.
I think.
And I thought, oh, I've tried all them, but I think they've done it synergistically and added like a probiotic or something. And it's from the day that I started taking it, all my chronic fatigue stopped. And Plum Island was actually a biowarfare.
Yeah,
It
it's been
was a
happening a long time, yeah.
yeah. So they were experimenting on this bacteria, which apparently was, got away. And so everything that was happening through COVID, it was like, hang on a minute, I've lived this. It
Mm,
seems like the same thing. And then now people who have long COVID pretty much have a lot of the symptoms of long Lyme disease.
yep, yep. It's
And
the same
so
bioweapons that they've
it's,
released and so forth, and then telling people that there's no hope. Um,
yes,
and but there is. There
absolutely,
definitely is.
absolutely.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Health Alliance Australia. My name is Jenny Rose Angewartha, and I'll be your host today. Health Alliance Australia is a leading health advocacy organisation dedicated to honouring bodily autonomy and well-informed health choices. Today, we're delighted to have Di Ellis here. She is a veteran warrior in this space, and we're talking about her experience healing using alternative healing modalities. She has experience with a vaccine injury, chronic fatigue, Lyme disease, cancer, and I think one thing that really caught my eye was when she said many of the things that are good for COVID were good against Lyme and cancer. Di, if you'd like to introduce yourself additional to that, that would be perfect. I think one of the wonderful reasons I brought you here with your decades worth of experience is that you see a lot of people in this space who've just sort of jumped on board, doctors who've just come on board, and you can see, because we've been in this for a lot longer, that they're very much at their infancy in terms of learning about the body and healing. And those of us who are further down the track who kind of worked out that vaccines were bad years ago, are further along, even without our, medical degrees and so forth. So it's just wonderful to hear everything from your perspective of what you've learned, because you can't really go past experience. So I think you've also said you're a breathwork practitioner.
Yes, yep. Hi, Jeannie, and everyone at HAA. Yeah, it's wonderful to be here. I've really had quite a journey through my whole life with a lot of health challenges. And yeah, part of the breath work, being a work practitioner, also a pulsed electromagnetic field therapist. And I've done a few other mind body healing modalities as well, because often when you're feeling seriously unwell and the doctors are telling you there's nothing wrong, you know within yourself there's something wrong, but then you start to doubt yourself and then start exploring other options. And even though I definitely know I had serious physical health problems that needed to be addressed, looking at the mind body side of things was really helpful as well. And so I've learned to combine all those aspects and look into every aspect of health. And I've found that when we address the mind body side of things and the underlying stress, it definitely helps the physical body heal. And also there's some sort of magical things happen. Like often every time that I feel like I've gone through a blockage that I was having with my physical health, when I sort of unlock emotional connection or I release something, then all of a sudden a remedy comes to me, or a treatment or a doctor that really helps me. So yeah, it's been quite a challenge. I'm not really sure where to start.
Yeah, it's
Um,
quite a journey, isn't it? Like the way it all intertwines into it itself. So perhaps, and
yes.
you've also been involved with the AVN, and been an advocate, health patient support for Lyme disease in Australia, which is, I think someone said they were going to be very interested in the Lyme disease part, when I mentioned to a friend that you were going to be talking today. And part of the Senate inquiries, and you also know a lot about the patient neglect within the medical system. So I thought maybe we could just start about how your journey of health, like what what started you? Because we all started as kind of normal,
Yes.
everyday, conventional people. We went to the doctor. We believed in all of the medical paradigm. And for you, obviously,
Exactly.
there's a real shift. At some point, all of us make this. We didn't decide one day to become crunchy, and alternative. We didn't like the way that it's sort of made out as though somehow we all became brainwashed by the internet to become this crazy alternative people, but that we all started at a certain place and we started on that journey looking. So I'm sort of wondering for you, where did that journey begin?
Okay, so yeah, exactly. That's it. Really, people just want to live a healthy, happy life. We're not there to cause trouble or to, be conspiracy theorists. So my whole life, I was generally strong, and my whole childhood, I should say, up until 19. I did have a lot of asthma and allergies. So there was probably some sort of
Underlying.
immune underlying response or reaction to something when I was young. But generally, I was strong and well until I was 19. But I was always reliant on the asthma drugs, which kept me going. I'd just go to the doctor, get the drugs. Every winter, I'd probably be in hospital with the flu, just getting on the drugs, more drugs, and then off I'd go again. I'll be fine. When I was 19, I got a really bad flu. And what I didn't realize is it wasn't long before that I'd had a tetanus shot. And I started to get a little bit of fatigue. And I was thinking, this is strange because I was really active. I was into surfing and horse riding, all sorts of sports. And I started getting this fatigue that I didn't really realize what was going on. And then I got this flu and then I got really sick. And it didn't all it wasn't obvious what was happening until later, many, many years down the track, that I met a lot of people who were vaccine injured. And then I started to see the same picture was happening. So I developed chronic fatigue when I was 19, and I was going to all sorts of doctors and specialists. I was having house dust allergy injections, antibiotics, sinus washouts and operations, and more flu shots. And I ended up so unwell. I was in bed for months, and I would play cards and then I would rest my arms. And so while everyone else my age was out living, having a great life, I was bedridden for months and months. And over the next year or so, I gave up on seeing doctors because I was only getting worse. And it was pretty horrific actually to go from, very healthy, functioning young woman to suddenly bedridden. And eventually I went to a naturopath and I started eating better, and I never really got to the bottom of what was going on. And over time, I improved enough to be able to function, but I still had a lot of underlying problems. And it's funny because you see a lot of people who have got injuries now, and you can tick off a list of all the same types of symptoms. The tachycardia, the joint pains, the fatigue, the digestive problems, headaches, great long list of symptoms that I used to write down. And around 24, I learned about amalgam fillings. I had all those removed, and then by the time I was 26, I was fairly well, but still, this always, if I did too much, I'd be really wrecked. And so I knew my limits, and I would work within them, and just lived the healthiest life I could. And I had my first daughter when I was 26. And one of the doctors who I'd been seeing, who gave homeopathic mercury detox after I'd had the amalgams removed, I was on the Gold Coast, and I said to him, "Do you know anything about home birth?" And I don't really know why I said that, but I guess earlier in my life too, when I was very young, I was actually adopted. My adopted mother died when I was 3.5, and my dad remarried when I was about 5, and my stepmother had mental health problems, and she'd actually been hospitalized a couple of times through my childhood. And I'd go to the hospital and we'd see them walking around in white coats and just out of their mind on Valium and just like zombies, and it was really traumatic. So I think I'd had enough negative experiences with hospitals, that when I became pregnant, there was something in me that just said, I don't want to go to hospital. And I started to, I met the doctor, he said to me, he gave me the name of a hospital midwife. And I called her and she said, yep, I recommend home birth highly. And so I thought, wow, it must be good
That's
if the
amazing.
hospital, midwife recommended it. And so then I started to become really empowered, meeting all of these women who'd home birthed their children and really taking control of their own health. And that's when I first learned about some people having, or children having, vaccine reactions. And I thought, I thought about homeschooling too, because they were talking about homeschooling. And I thought, well, I might homeschool, but I don't think I would not give my children vaccinations because, of course they're good and they're going to help us and protect us from disease. But when I started to look into the research back then, I mean, that was 28 years ago,
Yep.
I started to see enough information that made me question it. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to question, I don't want to give something that I'm not 100% confident with. We're not going to go and buy a car that might maybe have some faults with it. We want a car that's,
Yep.
going to be reliable. So we're not going to go, I thought, I'm not going to go and inject something that might have side effects and might cause some damage, especially with all my experiences. And so, then, I ended up having two beautiful home births. A couple of years later, I had another daughter, and both of my girls never saw a doctor until they were in their teens. We would occasionally go to a naturopath or a homeopath, and sometimes my first midwife, she was always sharing natural remedies and poultices and all the old-fashioned sort of treatments that people used to use. And whenever I used to be scared and worried, I'd ring her up, and eventually she came to the point where she realized I just had fear that some of the times I'd ring her, I was just fearful, and she would say to me, Diane, you know what to do. And so it just really empowered me, and it made me feel like, hang on, maybe I have got this, maybe I can do this. And so that was just amazing, solid. It helped me create a really strong foundation. And I saw as the years went on that my children were very, very strong and robust. They had no health problems whatsoever. They had all the childhood diseases, which was wonderful back then because, at first I'd be a
Yep.
little bit worried because they were really sick with, high fevers, but I just let it happen, and I called on, the holistic practitioners that were, that I had available to me, and I always made sure there was people there that I could go to that would help me if I needed it for myself or my children. Um, Whether, sometimes there might be a doctor that I found who's open to alternative, treatments, or a naturopath, homeopath, and we'd use whatever we could. And so my girls have got natural immunity to virtually all the childhood
I mean,
illnesses.
it's funny, isn't it? We call it alternative therapies, alternative, but it actually is the conventional. The actual, there
Absolutely.
was historically all these things: home birth, homeschooling, what we now call alternative, the herbs, various remedies that we're all using were actually the mainstream. And it's actually
Absolutely.
pharmaceuticals and the various poisons that we've been introduced to, this idea of poisoning the body in order to create immunity, like that is a very, fundamental shift in what was
Yes.
for hundreds and hundreds of years, our human history of how we built immunity
Yeah.
through and our children. So it's learning to I see what you're saying. You learn to trust yourself.
Absolutely. And trusting in our own immune system, in our body, in our intuition. And I think what you're saying there about the interference, what people don't realize is the very worst interference we can have is when we're confusing the immune system. So if we're injecting something into our body, see, normally viruses, parasites, bacteria, they all come through the mucous membranes, the mouth, maybe if we cut ourselves, but our body will immediately send signals to, and the immune system will activate to, do whatever it needs to fight those viruses, parasites, and bacteria. But to have something injected straight into our body with all these adjuvants and everything else that goes in there, it's completely foreign to the body, and it's confusing the immune system. And the biggest thing that I've discovered is that it's rebuilding. You see some of these old people who, stoic old people who may have had one or two or three vaccines 50 years ago or something, but they've had nothing ever since.
Yep.
And they're so strong and robust. And some people, and a lot of the kids who have not had any vaccines, or adults as well, they seem to be, just they can go through everything and they're fine. And then there's so many of us who have all these chronic illnesses, and it doesn't really matter um, what the disease or illness is. The underlying problem is the immune function and the body being able to detox and get rid of pathogens. And so to protect our immune system without interfering with it is such an important thing.
And just knowing how to support your immune system. And it's sort of very interesting when you're talking about how you get to this point where it's just enough, right, to function. And I think a lot of us in that health journey, we do that. What initially happens is we look at the symptoms and we try and treat those symptoms. So if it's tiredness, or if it's a sniffy nose or whatever it is, we try and treat to that symptom. And then when we've corrected whatever thing that we've done to treat that symptom, we feel like, oh yeah, we're all good. But that actually isn't a measure of health. So it's interesting how you have progressed to go on further, to look in things like breath work, mindfulness, emotional healing, because all of that is a step beyond. And it's really for those people who truly want to deal with all the underlying issues of that disease process. Because
Yeah,
ultimately, if you're not going forward, you're going backwards. There's no real staying, the same. If you're not continuously moving in that direction, especially because we're aging as well,
yeah,
we need to be continuously doing things that positively impact our lives. So
absolutely.
so after that, did you have Lyme disease at some point?
Yes, well, so even though I'd created this strong foundation of this base of knowledge and empowering myself and my children, I still had a lot of underlying, when I say problems, compared to when I was 19, I was a lot better than what I was then. But I still couldn't push myself too far or I would crash. So there was still something very not right underlying in my body. But I'd sort of been to everyone and done everything that I seem to have been able to find. So I just learned to put up with it and deal with it. I was happy being a mum. I didn't have to push myself doing all these sporting achievements anymore. Not that I was a high achiever, but I
Mm.
was just really active and loved being active. But there was that part of me that had sort of died off and just settled for, okay, I love being a mum. This is what I do. It doesn't matter that I have this underlying chronic fatigue. And so life went on. One thing that happened is I got a filling in a tooth, which that night I had 10 out of 10 pain. And I
Wow.
went back to the doctor because I knew that dead teeth, and it wasn't a root canal, it was just a filling, but I knew dead teeth and root canals, that sort of thing, they can have a really big impact on our health. And after I'd done, had the mercury fillings removed, then I'd been to some conferences, and I was always educating myself and learning more. So I'd had this tooth checked, but I was told it was fine. And as the years went on, I was starting to get these more weird symptoms. I was getting some tingling in my hands and feet, and I was thinking, oh, am I getting MS or something? And again, I'd sort of felt like I'd already been to all the doctors and everyone that I'd been able to see in the past, and they all saying nothing was wrong, nothing wrong. So I just sort of put up with it. And then it was about 15 years ago, I got a lot of tick bites. And then the first lot of tick bites, I had a lot of fevers and sweats that night. The next day, I rang a friend of mine who was a nurse, and she's amazing. She had been diagnosed with MS and said they'd probably told that she'd probably be in a wheelchair in 6 months. And she said no. And it actually came on, to be honest, within a week of having the Hep B vaccine when she was working in the hospital. And
Mm.
this had actually happened twice. And sorry, that she couldn't walk within a week.
Yeah.
She got better, and then she was told it wasn't the vaccine, and then had another shot. It happened again, and a couple of years later developed MS. But she said when they said you'll be in a wheelchair, she said, no, I won't. And she went and did all this amazing research.
Amazing.
She saw a biomedical doctor and did a lot to get better. And so as soon as I got all these tick bites, I rang my nurse friend and I said, look, I've been having these fevers and sweats. And she said to me, look, go to the doctor and get antibiotics, because it's not worth mucking around with, because there's this thing called Lyme disease. And so I did that, and I seemed to get better and everything was fine and just went along like normal. 6 months later, I got another lot of tick bites. And from then on, I think I got the antibiotics again, and I just didn't get better.
Yeah.
I was having fevers and sweats every night, and then went to the hospital and they gave me a little white tablet. And I said, what's that? He said, I'll take that, you'll be fine. And I said, what is it? And he said, Valium. He said, you've got anxiety. And I said,
God.
I'm not taking that.
Oh my
I was
goodness.
fine before the tick bites. And he said, oh, just set it off. And but within 6 months, I had lost about 17 kilos. And I was seeing every doctor and natural practitioner that I could. I nearly died, and I spent about a week in hospital. And again, they were just telling me it was anxiety. I was in severe pain. Yeah, I could hardly sleep. I could hardly walk.
Awful.
And luckily, I went and stayed with family, and they took me to another naturopath. Yeah, so the naturopath gave me some alfalfa leaf tea, just a spoonful in a mug of boiled water, half hour before breakfast and half hour before dinner. And the next day, I felt like I had a football under my ribs. And later that day, I had to go to the toilet, and I knew my liver was flushing out. And from then on, I put on about 2 kilos in 2 weeks, which at that time was just a huge relief. It still took a long time to recover. I was still weak and not well for about a year, but I was managing. I could actually look after myself, look after my children, who were about 11 and 14 by then. And ironically, it was about the next, about 8, 9 months later, I thought, okay, there's something still wrong with me. Maybe I'll do some breathwork training as a practitioner, because I'd actually been doing breath work for many years regarding the trauma that I'd experienced when I was young after I had my first daughter. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to do some practitioner training, because maybe it will help me to work out something, whatever's going in my body.
Yeah.
And during the training, the trainer said to me, put some intentions down, write some intentions down about how you would like your life to be. And so I wrote down, I'd like to heal. And the
Yeah.
trainer said to me, well, what happens if you're healing for 20 years? How would you like to be once you are healed? And so then I said, oh, okay, I'm running, surfing and swimming again, healthy and strong. And within 2 weeks, an abscess came up on this tooth that I'd had a filling and lots of pain. And I thought, oh no, it's my tooth. And so I went straight to a holistic dentist that I knew who'd moved up from Sydney. And he, we did an x-ray, and he said, the tooth's dead, there's a big abscess there. And he removed it, and he said it would have been poisoning me for years. And
Oh.
so, yeah,
Even though it was just a filling, right? So it was just that
it was,
it was that tooth that had a filling in it, and they'd sealed some bacteria and things in it.
so when he'd done the filling, the root of the tooth must have died.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, so that would have created the abscess, my body trying to isolate that. Yeah. And so so within about 4 months, I'd gained enough strength and I'd improved so much that I was able to go surfing again and being active.
Yes, wonderful.
I still had a lot of the Lyme disease symptoms. So I still had a lot of really severe fibromyalgia, sort of pain in my muscles, digestive problems. Every time I ate, I had burning, as if I had a stomach ulcer, but I'd had, a test for H. pylori, and that came back negative. So I still had really severe Lyme disease symptoms, but I was well enough that I could be active again. And so that happened for about 4 years, no, another 3 years. So 4 years in total. I had some really severe Lyme disease symptoms without any relief, apart from I just kept on doing the liver
Yep.
cleansing. I found Dr. Holder Clark's book, and I thought everything that she talks about, the basic simple things of liver cleansing, kidney cleansing, killing parasites, viruses and bacteria, and removing toxins, that was sort of a bit of a base of her protocol. I thought, well, all those things have really helped me already. And I was doing her liver flush, which really
Yep.
helped me a lot, the olive oil and Epsom salts.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I just kept on doing those all the time, just, hoping that I was going to get better. And after about the 4 years, I started to learn the internet was coming in more, and, more, I was going on to support groups more. And then I learned about Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, and he's specializes in Lyme disease over in Europe. And anyway, and I listened to everything he was saying, and I thought, that's exactly what my symptoms are. And I'd had so many tests for Lyme disease here in Australia, and they all kept coming back negative. Anyway, and so I started researching more about Lyme, and I found a molecular biologist who was also a homeopath, homeopath nutritionist and herbalist in the States, and had phone consultations. And I actually started to get some real relief from
Yep.
proper treatment for Lyme disease. Um, and then I started to become involved with the Lyme Disease Association of Australia. And I started to see that there was hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people around Australia who had all these symptoms and illness that just weren't getting treatment.
So what
And
are the protocol like for Lyme disease that you would go through? Like what did you
so
do? Was it nutrition based and as
yeah,
well?
there's a lot of things that people try. And to be honest, by the end of, after a couple of years, I had literally storage bags full of different natural, remedies, homeopathic, essential oils, and all these different treatments. But I mean, I could list a million things, but the main things that really helped me, one was the beginning peppermint oil capsules. The ones with the strong case on the outside, so it goes through the body and then releases further.
Yep.
What do they call that? I can't remember what it's called. But peppermint oil capsules, it was amazing for my digestion. That gave me huge relief and a lot of symptoms, because that was something to really kill the parasites, the
Yep.
pathogens. And then colloidal silver was helpful. Um, there was a lot of things that I took, and to be honest, there's so many I couldn't list them all. But then I found in 2013, I was at a film and a support group for Lyme disease, and I met a veterinarian who, his wife tragically had died of Lyme disease,
Mm.
and they were in their 70s, and they were both veterinarians, and they'd been given $1 million grant to study tick-borne illness in cattle.
Mm.
And he said to me, I've seen Lyme bacteria under the microscope. And he said, the reason why it's not coming up positive in the testing that they're doing here in Australia is because they're using the ELISA test, which tests for antibodies. But Lyme disease suppresses the immune system, so we don't produce
Yeah.
antibodies. And he said he he went to all the health departments, he spoke to so many heads of immunology and parasitology and all the rest, and no one wanted to listen to him. And so tragically, his wife never got the treatment that she needed. And he said to me, he said, look into this MMS. And he said something about it being a bleach or something like that. And I thought, there's no
Mm.
way in the world I'm going to use some sort of bleach or
Yep.
something. I've been so careful and thorough with helping myself to get better. But ironically, I went to the health food shop just nearby where I was, and I said, do you know anything about MMS? And they said, oh yeah, we've got some here. And I thought, oh, okay. So I bought some as a little bottle for $13. And I looked into it, I researched it, and I realized it was just a salt with an extra oxygen molecule, and you activate it with hydrochloric acid,
Yep.
and it becomes chlorine dioxide. And as soon as I started using it, I had so much relief, and I didn't have to use all of these other things that I was taking. And it was just, I do feel like it probably saved my life, because later on I was on that daily, and it was amazing. And then later on I started to get an itchy scaly spot on my back. um, Sorry, I know I've sort of brushed over the when you asked me about the treatments for Lyme disease.
No, no, no. That's
um,
all. I sort of understand what happens when you do get you get these things, and because we're sort of working with just the people we know, right? You often there's multiple ways to actually get healing. Like that's not
yes.
necessarily the one way. So it's interesting with what you've said, because we've just published or finished an interview with Dr. Karen Johnson, and he talks about healing on the regenerative healing on the atomic level. And so what he talks about was the hydroxy radical, which is what we're talking about with MMS will effectively do, is it will break apart on the atomic level the pathogens and the viruses and so forth, and cause atrophy, producing carbon dioxide, water, and energy. So, and there's multiple ways I think that this can be achieved. And for you,
Yes.
some people will use various treatments, but it's understanding the underlying thing is actually it's taking like almost humanity's experience, collective experience, and knowledge to come to understanding what we're actually doing. Because in a lot of ways, we sort of, as people who are trying to heal, we're trying to keep our lives together. We try and keep our children fed and
Yes.
work, and then we're doing we're juggling all these different things, and we only really often get time to just try something. Whether
Yes.
we try it and does it work, and we may not actually understand the whole mechanism behind it all until
That's
years
it.
later. Years later, we go, that's why it worked.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
I did water fasting 3 times, 7-day water fast, and I didn't understand really the mechanism for it until I interviewed Dr. Jolie, who talked about how when you water fast, it produces an enzyme called RNase, which chops up all the viruses and causes atrophy, which is the same kind of thing. What we're looking towards is basically destroying the cells that no longer serve us, that are
Yes.
diseased, and
Yeah.
removing all of
Yeah.
those toxins from the body, and obviously giving us enough water to flush all of that out, and
Yeah.
then get back into that status, because the body actually does want to heal. And it's
Exactly.
very interesting what you're saying initially about when you were asked the question, what do you want to do after you heal? And that what happens when we get sick, this is what I found in my experience, is you accept a certain level of functionality, and you don't even realize that that level of functionality is far lower than what you experienced before. But it's okay, because you got a life to live. But then when someone asks you a question of what would you really like, you look back to your childhood, what would you really like to do? Would you like to run, jump, surf, all of those things? Then you start to think, man, I really like to do like a 15K hike. I really want to go skiing, or I really want to, start ice skating or something like that. And then you realize how your body isn't functioning to that level.
Exactly.
And then you realize, okay, I have to do something about it. And because you've extended that goal, you actually, you meet where you're at. Whereas I think what happens with a lot of people is they just get to that point of, oh, I just want to be functional to just get through each day.
Yes. Yeah. And when people have been that way for a long time, they get used to it, and then they just go along and don't realize how much they can get better. And when you talk about what's happening I think that's why I can't throw in all these different treatments that I've used. What you said about the mechanisms that are happening in the body, that's where I found the true healing is. How can we activate the right mechanisms in the body? How can we get so that, like you said about what's happening on a cellular level,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
oxidants and antioxidants. And so, yeah, that's what I found is that, okay, you can have all these different treatments and remedies, but are we getting our own immune systems and cellular function? That's the main key where you get the big changes. And so when I found the MMS or the chlorine dioxide, CDS is the better form of it that I've discovered now with Andreas Kalker. That was oxidizing the pathogens. It breaks down glyphosate in the body into
Mm.
usable elements. It oxidizes heavy metals. So it does all this oxidation, but then you've also got to use the antioxidants to remove all the
Yes.
oxidative stress from the body. And so there you're getting, the processes happening in the body where that's what our body's immune system would normally be doing. There's, the oxidants that are naturally occurring in the body, and then the antioxidants like the catalase, superoxide dismutase. Sorry, I'm talking too fast and don't
Yeah,
get it
that's
all
all
down.
right. I think
And
it's interesting, isn't it? We have such an adaptive immune system compared to, say, animals. Like, I don't know if you've ever kept animals, but we had domestic animals for a while. Life, had, I think, an alpaca, a couple of sheep and chickens. And I was so surprised with how fragile these domestic animals were. A bit of cold, dead. Bit of heat,
oh,
like really, and then the amount of nursing. Whereas humans have an adaptive immune system, which is
yes,
very, very
yeah,
complex. So when I think to myself, well, no matter what they throw at us, we have this innate power within ourselves to heal. And when I look at your journey, it's very, very similar to what we would consider long COVID now.
yeah,
Yeah,
oh,
like, you had the
yes,
post-viral, and then very much the long COVID symptoms. The problem
yeah,
is, I think, is mentally, if people are going to be told there is no prospect of healing, that this is
yeah,
it, you've
yeah,
made this biggest mistake of your life,
yes,
and you're gone forever.
yeah,
That's it.
yeah,
Then
yeah,
already they've set themselves up for failure. And often for us who have faced, these illnesses, the doctors were all saying the same similar things. You're never going to
exactly,
heal. You're going to be on medication for the rest of your life. If you have a baby, you're going to die. All of
yeah, yeah,
those things are very much a medically based negative model. Where
mm,
here, where you've started is the mind first of what you believe is possible. And I feel that that is
absolutely,
really the key. First of all, people have to believe that they're going to be able to heal, because
yeah,
anything you try, if you don't try it with a little, at least the smallest amount of faith, then it's not going to work. I mean, that's what they call it, what, the placebo effect. And the
yeah, yeah,
placebo effect is just as real. When you tell people they're going to die, they
yeah,
really will just, crawl
yeah.
in their bed and die.
And the
Um,
positivity actually activates the feel good hormones in the body, which tells the cells it's safe to heal and put energy into reproducing and healing. Whereas when we're stressed and negative, we've got those stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol going through the body that signal the cells, oh, there's something wrong, we've got to shut down and protect. We can't put the energy into healing and reproducing. And so as soon as you change that perspective in your mind, you're actually releasing feel good and hormones into the body and the signals to tell the cells it's safe to heal.
And what I love about what you've done is you've always surrounded yourself with people that you've acquired knowledge from. And I think this is really the key. No one will have all the answers, and their answers may not be the right answers for you at the right time, but you're always seeking that. And I think that's a very important thing. We're in this world where we're looking for answers, is to seek different opinions, different viewpoints, and to see if that actually fits within our own
Yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah. Well, I had given up for a long time after the chronic fatigue, and then like I did hit that point where my normal was quite low, but ironically, the Lyme disease probably saved my life because a few years later, probably about 2013, 14, I had this itchy scaly spot on my back, and I used black salve, which is
Yep.
a herbal ointment that only eats cancerous cells. And I'd used it on a couple of other moles, and some it did nothing to it, and some of them it ate it away. And this had left such a big, it was creating such a big hole in my back. And I used it a couple of times and it just kept swelling up and getting a lot bigger. And eventually I freaked out thinking, great, I've got cancer too.
Yeah.
Because I had all these troubles down my right side and all these weird things, which I sort of thought was the Lyme disease. But looking back at it, it was after that tooth when I started getting the tingling in my fingers and my feet. I started now looking back, it was coming from the tooth with the abscess and the poisoning me. And so I ended up rubbing a really big amount of the black salve on my back, and it ate such a big hole in my back. I had to wash it off. And I was fine for about 6 months structurally. But then later on, I started to get like I was weeding the garden. I had tearing feeling in my back and tingling in my feet. And I dropped to the ground just thinking, oh, now I'm going to end up in a wheelchair, and I'm cursing. I'm cursing God and swearing and saying, I don't need this as well. And I thought, this is really great. But I kept on having the treatments that I was having. So I was having I'm just trying to think back then exactly what I was doing, the liver and kidney cleansing teas every morning. I was having the MMS at that time. And then around about that time, I met someone who was using a lot of bicarb soda. And I started having bicarb soda, and that made a huge difference. It gave me huge relief from the Lyme disease symptoms that I still had and the fibromyalgia. And anyway, around that time, I felt like I started to really notice improvements in my back and just overall. And so I thought, I want to have thermal imaging so that I've got proof of what's been happening in my body. Because my doctor, a really great holistic doctor that I found, he said, look, your whole nervous system and your whole body's just been, it's been in such a bad way, and you've really worked hard to get yourself good, to this level. He recommended not having an MRI, and which was, really great that, a lot of
No
doctors will
poison.
just throw you in to get every test or injection or anything that's there available. Anyway, he recommended thermal imaging. So I went and had the thermal imaging, and she got me to write down, draw a diagram of where I felt like was affected in my body. And it confirmed everywhere through my back, and it showed, heated areas coming down from where the tooth abscess had been, and particularly my right breast, both breasts, but especially the right breast, and all coming down from this tooth abscess. And at that stage, I was actually happy that it was confirmed, because I thought, well, I already knew that's what was happening in my body. And I know I'm getting better. And so I'll just keep on doing what I'm doing. At least I've got something there that I can say, look, this is what's been happening in my body. And I'll just keep on improving. And then through a lot of the support groups that I was involved in on Facebook, I used to not like Facebook years ago, but there's some really good, options there for learning information. And then I started oh, that's right. I shared so it depends how deep we want to go into all these stories, but I found out about GC-MAF. Do you know about
Oh,
GC-MAF?
yes. That's from Dr. Bradstreet, the one that was murdered.
Yes.
Suicided.
Yes, he
Unalived, yes.
shot himself in the chest and then he jumped in the river, as you would.
Yeah. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
it's kind of an enzyme, isn't it? It restores the gut.
Yes, yeah. I must say blessings to Dr. Bradstreet with the work
Yeah.
that he does, that he
Because
did.
he had an autistic son as a result of, vaccine injury, and
Yes.
so he went into that
Yeah.
he went into the lab literally and produced this enzyme, which is
Yeah.
where it is, isn't it? It's the key is the gut.
Yeah, so what he found was that when his son became autistic, he did a lot of research to find out what's going on. He found that there was nagalase in the vaccines, which is a cancer enzyme which shuts down the immune system. So the nagalase targets GC-MAF in our body, which is a
Right, yeah.
protein which is high in mammalian mother's milk. And that protein, so when I found out about this, so the story came out after he was murdered. The story came out, and he'd been using this GCMF for his cancer patients and autistic children. And so I thought, okay, I want some of this, whatever it
Oh, you
is,
got some
I
in
want some.
Australia.
well, well, I had it
Must have
coming.
smuggled in or somehow.
Oh, it cost like $600, and I'd lost my home, and I sold my home, and I was spending all my money on treatments, and I had it come from, I can't remember if it was Bulgaria or Bolivia or somewhere, in these unlabeled packages. So, and I remember this spray that I'd sprayed under my tongue, and at first I thought, oh yeah, that feels better. That feels better. But what was the amazing thing was that when I went into the sun, within 15 minutes, I had a really big Herxheimer reaction, which
Oh,
is a die-off reaction when the pathogens are being killed. So usually if you take an antibiotic or a herbal treatment to kill Lyme disease, you have a
mm.
reaction in your body when it's being killed off. I was having a reaction when I went into the sun because the role of the GCMF protein in our body is to upload vitamin D and activate our macrophages, a form of white blood cell. And so within 15 minutes of being in the sun, I was having a Herxheimer reaction because my own immune system was being activated.
Wow,
It
beautiful.
was incredible. And I was just like, wow, bring it on, give it to me. and anyway, and so, but then, I thought, I don't want to be spending this huge amount of money all the time on treatments. And this is the
Mm.
key that I really want to share with people. Some of the things we can do for ourselves are very, very simple, and we can do it for ourselves. So with what I learned about the GC-MAF, it's high in colostrum, the mother's first milk, mammalian milk. And there was a company who were making yogurt and making this yogurt GC-MAF, really high GC-MAF yogurt. And I thought, well, surely we can make it ourselves. So I got some milk kefir,
Mm.
and I know some
Grains.
people, can't tolerate milk, and, it's not always good to have a lot of milk, if at all. But I got milk kefir, and I ordered some organic colostrum, and I would add the colostrum to the milk kefir. I
Yep.
think I researched and I found people who were making it themselves, and they were doing it with the milk kefir and the colostrum. And as soon as I had it, it felt like I'd had a really, really strong dose of GC-MAF.
Oh,
So
wow. So
I
you've hacked the
knew,
system, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I knew I could make it for myself, and it was amazing. But
So
the
you can
good
just buy
thing
this
is,
colostrum online, can you?
yeah, yeah, you can buy it from a health food shop, and sometimes I think bodybuilders might use it because it's a higher protein, and
Yeah,
yeah,
I've still
you
got my
can.
kefir from years ago when I was recovering from heart failure. I got my
Right,
kefir grains. They're still alive to this day.
fantastic.
Nothing seems to be able to kill them. And even if
Yeah,
you don't wash the bottle, I mean, it doesn't go
yeah.
moldy. So I actually did
Okay,
a video
great.
on making it, but and you just get so much of it, you just give it away, right?
Yes.
It's like
Yep.
love being given to somebody else to help
Yeah.
their
And
gut.
even though you weren't adding the colostrum, you were probably getting a fair bit of GC-MAF just in that fermentation process. And if you've got a really good yogurt, you're probably getting a bit of it as well.
Yeah, it's funny
Um,
because when you were saying that, when I heard about GCMF years back, I'm thinking, my God, firstly, I can't get it. Then it was so expensive. And I thought, what can I do instead? And then by chance, I ended up finding someone offered goat's milk actually to me from her goats, and that was local. And then someone else offered me the kefir grains.
yes.
And before long, I was making this kefir. And one thing that's quite interesting was during my pregnancy, the one that was after heart failure that I wasn't supposed to have, that resulted in my 10-year-old now. I ended up, if you take beetroot juice, I don't know if anyone knows this, but if you take beetroot juice and it comes out of your wee as red, it means that your stomach isn't actually digesting properly. The
Ah,
yeah, yeah, it's sort of a test in some ways. So
yeah.
what had happened in our pregnancy, I was having juice every day, and I was taking, with beetroot, spinach, apple, orange, carrot, and something else, celery. And I would have this juice every day. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh my goodness, you don't like seeing red in the toilet or pink in the toilet when you're pregnant. And then I freaked out for a second. But then I sort of did a bit of research and realized, oh, it's okay. It's this thing where it's because of the beetroot juice. But what I actually did was I actually thought, okay, I'm going to have some milk kefir. So that's when I started the milk kefir. 2 days of milk kefir, and I would do the beetroot juice again, and my wee was clear.
So that
So
was helping your digestion.
yeah. So it's very interesting, this whole what you're saying here is that there are things that we've been gifted. I mean, kefir is one of those things that was they use, what I think it's in Russia, isn't it? And it's a longevity drink.
Yes, yeah. And I must admit too that I missed that at one stage there during my Lyme process, when I was still struggling to keep weight on. I was doing okay. I got into the fermented veggies and all the probiotics, making your own, and put on lots of weight, which was fantastic for me. And so that's another really important step too that people can do for themselves.
I don't know if you know, but the research actually says that with COVID, it actually destroys the gut bacteria, which is
Right.
why it's, whether it's, through whatever means you catch this thing. So one thing that's very important is to actually restore the butyrate levels and to store the gut bacteria. And these things can actually be done with fermented goods. I think there was one doctor who was saying that she tested a lot of the commercially available products,
Yeah.
and many of them didn't actually have the bacteria in them, which is a
Yes.
bit of a shame, because essentially we're just paying for expensive soft drink and
Exactly.
expensive,
Yeah.
but it's not the real thing.
Yeah.
So the safest thing for people to do, if they're really doing it for health conscious reasons, is actually to make it themselves. And it is cheap, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you're not paying
Definitely.
$5-10 a bottle for it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very affordable. You just have to initially take the investment in the grains,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then Bob's your
Absolutely.
uncle, and you can make it for the whole family. And I
Yeah.
think that's the thing, is when you're actually looking from a family level at all these, if you have to do all these supplements and all these treatments and everything for everyone, it becomes very unaffordable, right?
Exactly. And I mean, I think I think if you get someone who, like a biomedical doctor who can do your blood tests and say, look, you're really low in certain things, and there's your basic things that we need, which are good. But when you've just got so many going on, and that can actually confuse the body if you're having too many high levels of something, and yeah, it can just become overwhelming with everything. I mean, if you've got, you get your basics covered, so you've got your magnesium and your zinc, and something that a practitioner can help you with your basics, but then actually getting your own body's functioning working.
So did you
Another
change
thing
your
I
diet as well? Have you been changing your
oh
diet as well?
yeah,
I imagine that that's
um,
part of your journey. It's
yeah,
often not
absolutely.
talked about,
Yeah,
because
absolutely. Well, during the period between when I got the tick bites and when I ended up in hospital nearly dying, a friend of mine gave me a book about the negative effect of too many grains.
okay, yep.
And so then I thought, okay, I'm going to cut out grains in my diet. And I all of a sudden I had heaps of energy. I wasn't having the fevers and sweats, and I was really feeling a lot better. That obviously didn't, I mean, I was still having potatoes and pumpkin and other sort of carbs. Um, yeah, so I was trying to keep my weight on, but yeah, even though, and during that sort of time period, I didn't matter what I was eating, I was just losing weight, and it wasn't helping. But there was a period of time there where I had huge improvement and then went down again. And then, but then if I did eat more grains to try to put on more weight, I would have really bad, fevers and sweats and be a lot worse than I was. And so ever since then, so that's been nearly 15 years now. Oh, sorry, I've got a little tickle in my throat. Nearly 15 years now. And so I've had a lot of time to really experiment with my diet to see what's going to make me feel optimal. And basically for me, the paleo and keto type of diets, where I mean, I have tried being vegetarian, almost vegan. That just didn't work for me. I didn't have
Yep.
strength and I really struggled. So basically proteins, vegetables, a little bit of fruit, a little bit of nuts, and that's pretty much it. When I cook veggies, I cook a huge big pot, and we'll often have that in the morning with some eggs, and that's sort of my staple. Like sweet potato is a really good staple for me, and then of course your salads and yeah, so a very basic sort of meat, veggies, a little bit of fruit. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? Like everyone has to find what works for them in a very, stay away from packaged food, stay away from sugar, oils, limit them, even if they're good oils. I mean,
yes,
you should be limiting them, finding that balance, not too much fat.
yeah,
And and I think at different stages too, there's different nutritional needs. Like if you are detoxifying, you can do certain diets, water
yeah,
fasting and so forth. And it doesn't necessarily, they call it a convalescent diet. From my, family history, a convalescent diet used to be rice porridge. But you
okay,
can't imagine actually, I think it was chicken rice porridge, but you can't actually imagine eating that for the rest of your life, right?
yes, yeah,
But the
and I
reason
think
why they gave it was because it had that high energy with the white rice.
yeah,
And obviously because even though it's a grain, the problem with grains, it's hard to break down, and they also carry mycotoxins in them. So when you want to give your stomach a rest, the white rice porridge was just something that could give you energy, but also, it wasn't going to be too taxing on the digestive system. But if you're going to eat
yeah,
that long term, it
yeah,
certainly isn't helpful to you. And I
yes,
think
yeah,
people have to get to that intuitive side of themselves to say,
yes,
what's right for you? And we have a lot of these food
yeah,
wars going on, and I think there's a
yes,
lot of people who are sort of making money off writing books, right, about their particular
yeah,
plan and their
yeah,
particular idea of health. But ultimately,
yeah,
I think food is a very personal
yeah.
thing.
And you've got the blood types and the cultural, what people have been eating for centuries and what their
Yeah.
body is used to having. And so that definitely plays a big part in it as well.
Yeah, because bacteria is passed down from your mother. So therefore, I mean, it takes a lot to even change diets, because I don't know if you know, but like with say animals, even if you sharply change their diet, they can actually die
Yes.
because they don't have the bacteria to digest the new diet. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, it's a bit strange. Like we as humans, we tend to be very flippant about how we make a change. It can be very, very sudden. We decide, okay, we're allergic to milk. No, we don't do it sort of gradually. We don't wean off gradually in something. We become one thing or another. It becomes very, very
Yeah.
extreme,
Yeah.
from carnivore
Yeah.
to, extreme raw food vegan, like there's
Yeah.
there's those levels, and yet there's a
Yeah.
whole spectrum in between of
Yeah.
non-processed natural foods that energetically people have to work out what's giving them energy. And I think that's where
Mm.
you've come to as well in that whole
Yeah.
journey,
Yeah.
which is
Exactly.
quite confusing at times, I think, because if you go onto the internet, you're going to find 1,000 different answers.
Yes, yeah.
And
And it's interesting when you say about the bacteria being passed down. I recently met someone from South Africa, and when he moved to Australia, he said that he got this really, really bad Crohn's disease. And it was actually so bad that the doctors were about to remove a huge part of his bowel. And his wife was so persistent in trying to help him recover. He got in touch with a doctor who does the fecal transplant implants or
yep.
fecal transplant, and he did that. And within days, he had huge improvement. And he basically worked out that shift, that move from South Africa to Australia, and the complete change of his
Mm,
diet, it just had his body just hit
couldn't make the
the
adjustment.
bacteria that he had in his body couldn't digest the food here properly, and it just completely threw his digestion out.
Yeah, and even like moving climates, I myself found that when I moved to a very cold climate where it was cold for a long period of time, because of I need a lot of sun for vitamin D due to my skin color, um, it was actually really bad for me. Like I
Right.
need to actually live in a place where I do get sunshine. And of course,
Mm.
every year that passes when you're living in this cold climate and you're living indoors a lot, and you're not getting that vitamin D because of your genetics, was actually depleting my stores and
Yes.
leading to sort of chronic illness. So it's interesting, when you're looking for as humans on a biological level as different, when you're
Mm.
considering the environment that we're living in,
Mm.
it really shows you kind of the big picture. And hopefully for different people, our discussion today will help them pick apart, because it could just be that one thing, isn't it? Like it's that problem is that, like for you, it was that one thing for a little while was your tooth
Yes.
that was holding your health back.
Yeah.
Or it could be a
Well,
lack of iodine, or it could be just, and how do you
yes.
pinpoint that one thing? You could be
Yes.
doing all these other things right.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, and that's it. It's if you're missing one aspect that's having a really big impact on your health, it doesn't matter if you do all these other things to that would be good. It may not be helping because you're missing that one thing. And yeah, so finding and so basically for me, the vaccine injury when I was a teenager, um, actually, I'll tell you how I found out about that. When I learned about Dr. Bradstreet, I shared on one of the Lyme disease support groups. I said, I can't believe I've had chronic fatigue ever since a vaccine when I was 19, when I was young. I didn't even realize. And I suddenly had all of these people telling me that, oh, all same thing, same experience. And a lot of them, and then a mum came on and said that her daughter had Lyme disease after a Gardasil vaccine. And then I heard all these stories about the same thing happening. And so often it's that damage to the immune system. And then when there's a pathogen or something else introduced, the body just can't handle it anymore. And so, like you
Mm,
said about, the expression of disease or illness, it doesn't really, I believe now that it's basically the same thing: viruses, parasites, bacteria, toxins, and the immune system not working properly. If we clear out the pathogens, we clear out the toxins, and we get our own immune system working properly, then things are going to come back on board. Our body's going to start healing itself automatically. But it's just the mechanisms, how to work out, because we are all so different, which is actually, but to be honest, I do find that and when I support other people to get well, is often helping them to recognize that, okay, someone might have Parkinson's, or someone might have digestive problem, or someone might have, something, multiple sclerosis, but it might be similar pathogens. Like Dr. Klinghardt says that every single Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, motor neuron, and multiple sclerosis patient he has tested for Lyme disease all come back positive. And once they clear out the pathogens, you get improvement. It's just that the pathogens are going into different areas of the
yeah,
body: the
yeah,
nervous system, the brain, the digestive system, the muscles, fibromyalgia symptoms. And so once you address the pathogens, um, remove the toxins, because often the parasites can hold heavy metals, and so we've got to be doing diatomaceous earth or zeolite or something to remove the heavy metals when we're getting rid of the parasites. Clear that out, and then maybe doing some GC-MAF or whatever else is needed to try and help the immune system back on. Maybe the chlorine dioxide is good too, because Dr. Kalka talks about, he's got 4,000 doctors who are using his protocols for vaccine injury, and they've pretty much found that nearly everybody with vaccine injury has a big improvement. Not often, back to what they were, not always, but like it will remove the spike protein from the endothelial cells
yeah.
apparently, and it oxygenates the blood. It does so many things, and so there's these fundamental basics that
So do you know what his protocol was exactly or not?
he does have he on his website, so Andreas Kalker, KALCKER.com. He does have protocols there. So on the drop down menu that it says CDS and
Yeah.
then CDS protocols. And he's got a book I know on overcoming COVID. So I think that's pretty much COVID and COVID vaccines. And he's got, I think he's got some protocols that are different. Some for like if you've got a virus that's suddenly come on and you can take strong amounts. People with chronic conditions need to go really slowly because they've already got such a bacterial or viral load in their body, and it's through a lot of their body and their cells. They've got to go slowly.
Yeah, otherwise
but
they can get very, very sick and
yes,
it's
definitely.
just too
Yeah,
much. But it's interesting
yeah,
that the whole secret of it all is the endothelium cells, right? It's
yes,
and if that's also very much connected to heart disease. And I think
yes,
if you watch, say, the video we did with Dr. Fleming, he says they're both at these different extremes. You've got cancer and you've got heart disease at both sides, but they're both expressions of the same disease process in monothrombosis. But I've also noticed that I have a friend who's a health coach as well, and he uses a different protocol altogether, which is just a plant-based, no oils, whole foods diet. And what he's found was that also helps rebuild the endothelium because you're putting the ingredients in. One of the things that I think Dr. Eccleston says is greens. So of some kind, steamed with balsamic vinegar, chewed 6 times a day. If people can do that, will actually produce nitric oxide, and because with the chewing mechanism and the bacteria in your mouth, and then they will actually regrow the endothelium. So there's so many, I think there's so many different ways that this can be handled. And obviously people have to go with something that resonates with them
yes,
to heal.
absolutely.
So did you even
Yeah.
try, I guess you must have tried infrared saunas and all sorts of different things as well.
I actually didn't do the infrared sauna. No, what I had because I actually lived in Yamba, which is about 2 hours south of the Gold Coast, although I probably could have travelled further to do that sort of thing. It was more a lot of the herbs and remedies and homeopathics and supplements and all that sort of thing.
So you didn't do the
Yeah.
sweating or because I guess
Oh, I
I'm
did.
interested to see here that you've now sort of moved on to, we should talk about this actually, breath work and this other thing that you've mentioned, which was the
The PMF therapy.
PEMF. Well, I actually saw that yesterday and I thought they were very interesting because what I think too is when you're really sick with chronic fatigue, right?
Yeah.
What ideally, you need to get moving again. This is
Yes.
because you
Yeah.
need the body to move in order for it to heal.
You know
But then
what
you're so
happened?
sick.
Sorry.
How do you get that oxygen in?
Yeah.
So, there are these methods, obviously breath work is one, and this one that I've actually not really heard a lot about it.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I
if you
must
want to talk
say,
about that, yeah.
yeah, sure. I must say that when you talk about chronic fatigue and exercising, what I found was that, and I can't remember exactly what, I think it might have been Dr. Klinghardt or someone who talked about when we exercise and naturally our muscles tear and then rebuild bigger. What I found is that with the Lyme disease and maybe with the chronic fatigue as well, and maybe I even had Lyme disease right back from early on, I don't know, but and it was expressing in a different way. But when you exercise and the muscles tear, I believe now from what I've experienced and what I would feel after having had the tick bites, and it seemed as though my symptoms of the Lyme disease became a lot worse in the muscles that I exercised, and which made it really hard to exercise. And so
You think
because
that might have been a Herx reaction or not?
well, no, just a lot of pain and
Okay.
fibromyalgia sort of feeling, and then not being able to sleep,
Yeah,
and
which is no
so
good.
but then when look, there's so much we could talk about. It's hard to. So when I actually started using the MMS and the bicarb, and then even during COVID, then I started using ivermectin and fenbendazole when I started to learn about those. And I had huge improvements in my spine, like, and my back, and the areas that seemed to be a little bit of cancer still left there. And I say cancer in possible
Yeah.
cancer. Um, and so when I would take those treatments that would kill the pathogens at the same time as exercising, and for the couple of days after when the muscles are repairing, I would be much, much better. And
Mm.
so I think the exercise, yeah, that tearing of the muscle, the pathogens get into the muscle fibers easier,
Yeah.
and and then they have a bit of a party in there, whatever they do.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think that's one of the reasons why
Secret.
people who are chronically ill or with chronic fatigue or long COVID or whatever, the reason they get so much worse when they exercise is that mechanism of the pathogens getting inside the muscle fibers a lot easier after exercising.
And they
Um,
don't want to obviously exercise if they're going to not feel rewarded. Because often I think with
oh,
all of this stuff that we do, you try something and there has to be a reward out of it.
yeah,
You have to
yeah,
feel that
yeah,
there is some sort of progress, or at least understand that if something doesn't, like when you had the Herx reaction, you knew that it wasn't something bad. Like, so you
yes,
embraced it. Yeah. So, and I
exactly.
think it's interesting, these other things that are coming along, oxygen chambers, and hyperbaric
Mm,
oxygen chambers, PEMF,
yes,
saunas, they allow people to do things and get their body in a position where it can essentially restore balance. I mean,
yeah,
they're not, I don't think these treatments are necessarily something anyone can really afford to do
yeah,
indefinitely.
yeah,
But certainly if you're chronically ill or you are sick and you want to extend your health to that level, and I know
yeah,
athletes do use hyperbaric chambers as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
Um,
I think it's fantastic. All these options, the infrared and the hyperbaric, I think trying it and seeing what it's like, if it helps you, absolutely. And this is the PMF. This is the Tesla coil that I've got.
okay.
So the Lyme disease in 2019, the Lyme Disease Association of Australia, they sent out an email saying that this device was coming over from America, and it had been developed by people who had Lyme disease. And so I went along to one of the demonstrations, and because I had a little radio show at the time, and I said, look, I'd love to interview you. And they were really, keen to give me a session so that I could talk about it. And so when I was there, I just waited and waited because everyone was so keen to have a go on this thing and see what it was like. And by the end of the night, everyone was tired and we'd had enough and I'd missed out. And I
Oh
thought, oh
no.
no. And I still had symptoms and I was still in some pain. And so I was so disappointed. But they said, look, come back and have another go. You can have a go on it. But the next morning, I woke up feeling really different and really relaxed and thinking, wow, what happened last night? Because in this big room, there was 3 devices going, and it actually gives off, so this is a Tesla coil,
Yep.
and it actually gives off a field 4 feet by 4 feet, a pulsed electromagnetic field. And so it actually carries the rife frequencies via pulsed electromagnetic field. So sometimes with rife, and I did rife, and oh look, come to think of it, there's a lot of, it's funny how you put these things out of your mind when you've been sick and you anyway, I had done a lot of rife and things like that. But apparently sometimes with rife, the frequencies can go through and may go around the stomach and not penetrate through the stomach. So might not get to every cell. But this company in America with the people with Lyme, they were experimenting to see how can we, get through every single cell and get the frequencies delivered right through the body. And there's specific frequencies to target Lyme disease and every pathogen virtually. These
Mm.
amazing doctors and scientists have monitored the frequencies of our organs, our hormonal system, our emotions, every parasite and bacteria. And so, so it gives off this 4 feet by 4 feet field. And so when I was in the room with the demonstration, it must have been affecting me. And I just didn't really realize at the time. The next day I was like, wow. And then a few days later, I caught up with them again and they gave me a session. And it felt like something was pushing through my right side, and I'd had like a lump on my neck and things down my back, and it was almost so strong that I nearly felt like I wanted to say stop, but I did know something really good was happening.
Mm.
And so I just lay there and just tried to relax as deeply as I could. And it was pushing through and it was like it was trying to push through the energy blockages in my body.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I've had this now. So that's the coil. And there's a tablet here which has got all the different programs on it, and there's nutrition, organ support, cleanse, and
Yep.
so you
And
can
I
play
think the
on
really
different programs.
exciting time in science is that we can combine this understanding of energetic of the body, plus we can use a
Yes,
microscope, right? And we can actually
yes,
see what's
yes,
actually happening on the cellular level. And so the guesswork
absolutely.
is taken out.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
which
Well, I've
which is
done.
great because now we've got this merging. Like before, alternative health was seen as something that's on this extreme end, quacky sort of. But now I've noticed that it's a real merging of the actual science,
Yeah,
conventional science plus alternative. And because of that, I think we'll find that things like even regrowing teeth, I don't know if you saw that, but these ideas, they're all coming
yes.
into the mainstream.
Oh,
Uh,
look, it's fantastic. And that's the ultimate. If we can, I mean, mainstream medicine, there are some miracles that people have, you know, delivered to people who really need it. And to combine that with the natural self-healing sort of modalities, and then, it's the best way of helping humanity in every way.
Yeah, and helping, I think how I see it as a patient advocate, as a health advocate, is that what we that experiences are trying to do is help bridge the gap for these doctors who are very learned, in their specialities,
Yeah.
and they will come on board. They will quickly
Yes.
understand how the body works. Because how medicine, I guess, is taught is that, you treat the heart, you treat cancer, and you're not looking at things holistically as
Mm.
what we've sort of discussed here. And so I think
Yeah.
one thing that you've also touched on is also breath work. And I think all of us gets to that
Yes.
point. We think of food, like I think it's very common when people have a health issue to think food and supplements, right? These
Yeah.
are all some sort of treatment alternative to fix a problem, whether it's pharmaceutical or um, natural based herbal. But often we kind of leave out, exercise, that sort of comes into play next, but then breath work, it's like, because people will
Yes.
think that just because they're exercising, that they're actually breathing. But breath work
Yeah.
is something additional, and it's very important because all our cells need
Yeah.
oxygen and nitrogen to
Yes. Yeah.
function.
Well, I must say that the sort of breath work that I do, it's more the mind body. We definitely do, you know, breathing into the diaphragm and finding areas that we've locked down with tension or trauma. And so there are some, like the Wim Hof breathing. I actually love that breathing, but it's
Mm,
not necessarily what I do in my practice. That's where it's really oxygenating the whole body, and you're exploring different states with that. The breath work that I do is more of listening to the body and allowing the body to show you what it needs. And often with someone, if they're talking about, like, I'll ask them how they are or what's happening or what they would like to achieve in their life, and then we'll tune into what's holding them back. And then also, I'll often notice their breath if they're not breathing into their abdomen, and helping them to release the energy blockages. And often there can be an energetic trauma or emotions that are held in the cells of the body, and that will stop that tension. Even it could be physical. So someone may have fallen off their bike when they were young
mm.
and they've hurt their hip, and that tension may have stayed in the hip, and so that's sort of tighter over this area, which might be restricting the breath. And so I'll encourage the person to relax and to breathe, and then often in a session the emotions or the feelings or the images, it comes up spontaneously.
Yeah.
And it's just about tuning into that person, allowing them to feel themselves, to actually stop and take the time to listen to their body and allow their body to do whatever it needs to do. And sometimes it'll be, they might have energy moving. One time, I used to think rebirthing was a little bit far out because it's,
Yeah.
but I've had someone in a session where they had all this tension in their neck, and I said, just let it happen, just let your body do whatever it needs to do. And they ended up like really, and she said, it's like 10 out of 10. And I said, that's okay, just let it happen. And she just let it happen. And she said it went up to her head and then it went down. And then she saw all this purple and
Wow.
red. And anyway, and then after the session, it was a purely physical thing. And then after the session, she said to me, oh, I felt like I had my head in a vice. And she said, maybe when I was a kid, I was in a farm shed or something and someone had me in a vice. And I said, and I sort of giggled and I said, what was your birth like? And she said, oh, I had a forceps birth.
Oh my goodness.
And so it's
Yeah.
just bizarre that somehow the trauma from that,
Yes.
pain and what had happened, the fear that her mum was probably going through, that was all locked in energetically in the cells in her head and neck. And when she was shown how to just, okay, it's okay to let your body do whatever it
Safe.
needs to
Yeah.
do. And then the body just did it. And it wasn't about talking too much. It wasn't about trying to make the body anything different to what it was. It was just allowing the body to release or express or feel whatever it was feeling. And during some of that session, I would have been saying, it's okay, let it happen. Nice breaths into your belly, because she was probably, with fear and tension, not breathing. And then you're encouraging her to breathe and let go, and showing the body, oh, it's okay, I'm safe to breathe, I can be here in this physical reality. And the energetic shift that can happen in the body is really profound. And it again,
It
it's
is interesting, isn't it? That whole emotional side to healing. I think, all of us who've gone through it, there's always that emotional element that has to be unblocked to truly connect. I think when, in terms of modern medicine, they totally disregard that energetic side of the emotion, how we are feeling at any
yes,
one time. It just
yeah,
becomes very much a sterile, mechanical, logical kind of, yep, this needs to be done, get this
yeah,
done, and throw the
yeah,
patient out on the street. You're right,
yes,
we've fixed you. But
yes,
when we're talking real true healing, it has to come from the heart source and from that emotional seat. And often they do say, like with cancer, that in particular, that there is a very strong emotional trauma element that has been stuck
yes.
there, that you're
Actually,
sort of,
during my breathwork sessions for myself, oh, actually, when I realized that I probably had cancer as well, and I was cursing the gods and everything else, I actually, because my grandfather died of cancer of the spine, and I'd never met him, and I'd had all this anger towards him because he was the one who told my mother that she couldn't keep me because she was only 17 and 18 when
oh,
she had me. And as soon as I realized that I probably had cancer in my back and maybe my spine, I thought of my grandfather, and I straight away knew, I thought, oh, I have to forgive him. Even though I'd never met him, I had this really deep resentment that he'd made my mother give me away. And
yeah. I mean,
and
you
I
had a very
felt,
traumatic childhood, really. I mean,
yeah, I did
adult,
have,
like really, you've turned out quite well considering all things,
thank you. It's been a big journey. Yeah. But what's amazing was I felt like I didn't know how I would be able to forgive my grandfather. And like I even I sort of thought, okay, well, I don't know how I could forgive him because I felt this incredible anger. And then there was this resentment as well that I was sick and my body wasn't well. But it was just, and what I've noticed is that the depth of the illness or the pain that you're in can often be equivalent to the emotional pain. And
Yeah.
so when I realized that it was quite likely that I had cancer of the spine, I just thought, okay, I have to 100% surrender. I have
Yeah.
to fully surrender. And so
And that's
everything,
when healing happens, isn't it? Like,
yes,
this is
yes,
my particular journey. Like, you see people when they get a diagnosis and they go through this sort of panic stage, and
yes,
that's when things can go really south, right? But
yes,
once you get to that point, okay, accepting that this is part of whatever journey that you're on, and
yeah,
then let's find a solution. Let me dig deeper to find and uncover what it is
yeah,
that's causing all of this. Then it just becomes very easy,
yes,
and
yeah,
you just
yeah,
you take each day as it
yeah,
comes, and you can see with a lot of clarity what's working, what's not working, and
yeah,
everything just becomes part of that journey. You're not even afraid of making the wrong decision, because there is
yeah,
no wrong
yeah,
decision.
yeah, definitely.
It's
And
just the process.
it's a feeling that, oh no, actually, you know what? I'm okay. It's okay. And the amazing thing was that within a second or two, when I fully surrendered and thought, how am I going to forgive my grandfather? I had this image of him being a small boy, being chastised and chastised until
Mm,
his spirit was broken. And that's how he grew up, with a broken spirit. And then that's what carried on through the generations. And as soon as I saw him as this little boy with a broken spirit, I just wanted to hold him and love him. And I
no,
realized that the part of me that the he is a quarter of me, and I hated him so much, which meant basically I was hating a quarter of myself, on a
the
cellular
cellular
level.
level.
And genetically, I'm a quarter of him. And then as soon as I as soon as I realized, like this little boy who had the broken spirit, I felt like I wanted to love him and hold him, and that was like loving and holding a part of myself that I'd never loved.
Yeah.
And it was really profound, and it was just so enlightening for me. It was, yeah, just your whole being of who you are becomes more whole. And yeah.
Yeah, so it's almost like the whole journey of healing is, in a way, we find ourselves throughout this whole process. And I think, even in the backdrop of all that's happening in the world, it's like a lot of us have found ourselves in a deeper
Mm,
way, in a much more
yeah,
meaningful way. So
yeah,
I actually love that what you said about your granddad. There's a lot of men of his generation who suffered, and unlike,
yeah,
I think unlike our generation, who are now becoming much more open to talk about family trauma and
yes,
a lot of things about our lives, even health. I mean, it probably wasn't a done thing to have these kind of open discussions in the past.
mm, mm,
Um, and people held a lot of this to themselves. Nowadays, I think because we're much more open, we're sort of in a different place. We are healing our family generationally down the track.
absolutely, definitely. And it's a massive part of it, is healing that generational trauma. And it's a cellular, and that's another interesting thing. Like, if we have diseases that go down through the generations, like you said about digestion, the mother passes on good bacteria for the child's digestion, but they can also pass on viruses, parasites, and bacteria through all the family. And is the disease and illness genetic, or is it inherited from the behaviors, the patterns of emotional behavior, or is it actually the viruses, parasites, and bacteria? And all of
Mm.
those things can be addressed.
Yeah, and how we
Actually, and
respond to that.
yeah, and just when I think about it with genetically, it just suddenly reminded me one thing that absolutely helped my chronic fatigue was that a friend of mine got me onto this, and I know there's a few different forms of it. I think from broccoli, young broccoli shoots or something.
Broccoli sprouts, and you're supposed to
Sprouts,
freeze
yeah,
them and then have
yeah.
them afterwards. Yeah.
But the one my friend got me onto was NRF2. Have you heard of that one?
No,
It's
I've done the broccoli sprouts. You
yeah,
sprout them, you freeze them, you put them in a smoothie. I must say I'm not that sick.
yes,
It's quite
yeah,
bitter. I mean, I think some of the things that are really good for us often are like the teas in particular. They're quite bitter,
yeah,
because they're all detoxifying the liver
yeah,
and so forth.
exactly. Yeah,
Bitter herbs.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think if people are sick, they should do them, because
yes,
and there's no risk really. I mean,
yeah,
it's all benefit, no risk. The only downside is that you've got to sort of put up with the awful taste of
yes, yeah.
of it. But
Well,
what were you saying? Yeah.
yeah, well, the NRF2, when my friend told me about it, I thought, oh, I've tried all those herbs because it's a combination of 5 herbs. This Dr. Joe McCord, he worked with a team of doctors to work out how they can remove or help our own body to activate the antioxidants and
Oh, okay.
remove oxidative stress. And they came up with this mixture of bacoba, ashwagandha, milk thistle, green tea, and turmeric, maybe.
All
Yeah,
right.
I
Yep.
think. And I thought, oh, I've tried all them, but I think they've done it synergistically and added like a probiotic or something. And it's from the day that I started taking it, all my chronic fatigue stopped. And at the time, it was 30 years of chronic fatigue went, and I was doing so much, my back wasn't strong enough to keep up yet. But I was like, oh my God, I'm not crashing, and I'm not spending a week in bed after going for a bike ride. But that's what it did, was that it activated my body's own, like it activates your own antioxidants. But apparently it does. So the NRF2 protein goes inside the cells
Yep.
and upregulates good genes and downregulates bad genes. So when we're talking about genetics, people need to realize, like, okay, they might have the breast cancer gene or something happening in their families, but is there something else that's happened, that actually is making that gene activated in the body? And is there
Mm.
something that they can do to help our own body to regulate gene expression? And that's a part of the what Bruce Lipton talks about, the epigenetics.
Epigenetics.
And
Yep.
yeah, and
So
so
we changed. Yeah.
there's so many things that people, they think if they've given a diagnosis of something, there's so many other things that they can look at why that might be happening. It's not just, okay, they've got this, cut and burn, and that's it. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
because
there's
the model, I think, is simply a result of, I guess, I mean, we could say it's capitalism, but it's because you have such limited time with any particular practitioner that you want
yeah,
to see. So if you're going to go
yeah,
even into alternative health, how long are you going to see a doctor for? And often they just
yeah.
have their same. I went through that holistic practitioner thing, and they have their same protocol, same blood test that they give to everyone. So you kind of get
Mm,
churned into the system. But when you actually learn, and this is sort of like the whole process of these podcasts now, is when you actually understand the mechanism of the body, it's like not
mm,
you do it yourself, but a reframing of your understanding in order for you to make better choices. Um, and I
absolutely.
think here a
Yeah,
lot of people are going to, through our discussion and all the things that are happening sort of in the wider web of information, which is like I think why they wanted to shut us all down, is there's so much sharing going on, and this is
yes, yes.
that when there's all of this knowledge that's been given, and you've got decades, there's decades of knowledge
Mm,
between us,
yeah,
that people didn't have to go through. You know what I mean? Like all of
yeah,
a sudden, they're hearing what you're saying, what I'm saying, and they're
mm,
thinking, oh, okay, I can see the patterns here. I
yes,
can avoid that trap. Whereas we
yeah,
didn't have that. You
yes,
know, we just had to go through whatever we had to go through in order
yeah,
to find the answers. Nowadays, you've got such a wealth of people who've been through
yeah,
similar, and that's what I'd say to people who are
yeah,
going through long COVID or whatever injury that they have, vax injury,
yeah,
heart disease, cancer, that there is hope. and there are
Absolutely.
ways, and no one, I would just throw everything at it. You know what I mean? Like sometimes what people do is they'll just go for one thing, whether it's one drug or one treatment. And it's like,
Yeah.
if you throw everything at it, exercise, sleep, nutrition, detoxification, if you throw all of it at it, you can't go wrong.
And you'll very easily know, you'll feel what's right for you. And then you keep going which way it feels right. What's helping my body? Is that a Herxheimer reaction? I've actually noticed that over the years when I was using cancer treatments, like the molecular biologist in America gave me some, really good herbal and homeopathic things for cancer, and then all the things that I've explored with the GC-MAF and all the rest. And there was warnings that just be careful, because when you start, if you're actually breaking down abnormal cells, it's going to feel weak, it's going to feel tender. And so as soon as I started with the GC-MAF and I was feeling tender in areas, normally someone might think, oh, I'm getting worse, and panic and freak out. But that's what was expected. And that, luckily, I was told that it will feel tender because the macrophages, the white blood cells, are actually going in there and they're cleaning those areas up. And it's interesting because, and this is something that's really what I'd really like to share with people who are going through cancer. Well, I mean, like I say, I can't say I've had cancer because I chose not to have invasive testing and biopsy. But all through my back on my right side, I mean, where the black salve affected it, and I could feel when I would take certain treatments or remedies, I can feel it being affected. And I think, well, if I'd gone to the doctor and they might have cut out all those areas, all that muscle through my right hand side there, where that showed up in thermal imaging with abnormalities, and that muscle would be gone. But the way I'm doing it is that I'm using bicarb soda to alkalize the body, which pathogens and cancer cells can't survive in very well. I'm doing the CDS to oxygenate the blood and to kill pathogens, and it activates stem cell growth. I've done the ivermectin and the fenbendazole, which is thank you to mainstream medicine for pharmaceutical parasite medication, and I could feel that working in those areas. And so it's constantly removing the underlying causes, allowing the body to heal itself, and then the muscles repairing, and the cells. So often inside a cancerous cell, I believe from a lot of the research that I've looked at, there's often a virus, parasite, bacteria. You kill those pathogens, the cell either dies off or can heal, and the body will mend itself. And so now I'm gardening, I'm shoveling, I'm surfing, I'm lifting heavy cupboards, I'm doing things. 10 years ago, I was having trouble turning the shower on. And, my daughter was lifting shopping bags for me because I just couldn't do it.
And that's the measure of health, isn't it? What you can actually do physically.
Pardon?
That is really the measure of health, because often we see people see the measure of health as having blood tests or having scans, but you can have all of that. They can clear you and say you're perfectly healthy, but you're actually really, really sick because you can't actually do anything with your physical body. But you are.
Yeah. And, all those years that I probably had a lot of cancer in my body, I was still finding ways to live a really happy and healthy life.
You're really a trooper, aren't you?
I had to be like it. I mean, I look back and I think, oh, my life, everything that I've been through. But along that, I've had a lot of love and a lot of joy as well. And, there were definitely times that, if I didn't have my children, I would have just given up. But, there are a lot of things to live for, and it's.
I know. I think you can talk about it in the past tense in terms of, with a smile on your face and everything. But it's certainly, there's very, very dark period, isn't it? I mean, like it's
awful.
some of the lowest periods that you will feel in your life. And the sense of being alone. And I think this is where, for myself that I found, like you, connection online, like whether it's through Facebook groups, through podcasts, through listening to other people, was that because it's a very lonely space when you're sick. No one can
Oh,
really understand you, even your own family, because they still see you as a mom doing stuff, and they
mm,
don't see what's going on within you or the need. And as a mother, often you don't put and prioritize your needs at all, which is
yes.
really
Yeah,
probably, half the problem is that
yeah,
actually I
yeah,
had this wise bit of advice given to me, when I first was diagnosed with heart failure, which I ended up recovering from, was that in some cultures, the mum, she eats first and then she feeds the children because the
yeah,
mum has to be held. And I was thinking, all this time, often as mothers, you're often prioritizing your children and your family,
yeah,
and you don't prioritize your own health. And I think
absolutely.
this is with it, and fathers too can prioritize work and they don't
Mm,
prioritize their own bodies. But if you don't have
yes,
your body, right, you can have all the money, career success, and
yeah,
connection that you want, but
yeah,
you're not going to have that body. You only have one body from which to experience life from.
absolutely. Yeah,
So, and I think it's for
yeah,
us as women too, as people generally, to
mm,
stop and to learn again to care about our body, which is really an act of self-love.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
when you look at, say, a cat, you know how a cat sort of grooms itself, it spends an
Oh,
awful lot of time on itself, right? But how much time do we as people
yeah. It's
spend on
interesting.
ourselves?
It's interesting you talk about the cats because I was always a dog person, and then my daughter got a cat and moved, and then we've got the cat now. And cats, I realize they put their needs first, and whatever they feel, they express it. And that's something we should all do. But going back to when you said about the dark period, and this is probably one of the most important pet things for the people that really need, you know, help, who have been injured, who are really chronically unwell. That's so true what you said, that a lot of people around them don't understand. Yeah, I did a lot of patient support work in a voluntary position with the Lyme Disease Association of Australia because, I suffered for so long, so intensely, all day, all night, every day for 4 years and more. And it just was so heartbreaking to know that there were hundreds, thousands, and now there's just
Yeah,
hundreds
off
of
the scale.
thousands
Yeah.
going through this pain in their body, who are horribly sick, and they're just not getting help. And often,
And gaslit as well, that then they've got it all in their heads, which is another thing
exactly,
that people say,
exactly.
just get up, it's all in your head. The medical
Yeah,
side
yeah.
will not even do the test to figure out what's wrong with them. They'll just say, because they don't want to acknowledge what's happened.
Well, often the testing won't show anything anyway.
Okay.
And and so this is like with the Lyme
With
Disease
the Lyme disease, yeah.
Association. Yeah. I was for years I would support people, and so the testing was shown to be faulty that was being used. People weren't getting treatment, and so they might go to all of these specialists, all of these doctors, and get nowhere and told there's nothing wrong with them, even though they've clearly had, like the bullseye rash after getting a tick bite. They've got all the symptoms of Lyme disease, or maybe they don't. Maybe they didn't get a tick bite. Maybe they're just really chronically sick. And often friends or family don't understand. They are horribly isolated, and it's a really devastating, just horrendous position to be in. But to those people, I mean, just finding that one or two things that
Yeah.
really they're needing at this time could make all the difference. And it definitely is. Like, I was literally the naturopath that I saw when I was seriously ill. She didn't tell me at the time, but I already knew it anyway. A few months later, she said to me, "I think you're only a few days away from dying." And I said, "Yeah, that's how I felt."
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Another quick thing, it was interesting because I was getting all these blood tests and they were saying you're fine. And she looked at my bloods and said, "Well, your liver's as high as it can be. If it was a little bit higher, it would be high." And she said, "At your age, in my 40s, she needed, or 40, she said, your liver should be much lower than that." After I did the liver cleansing, just alfalfa leaf tea, my next blood test, the doctor said to me, "Oh, I think we need to get a biopsy and an ultrasound." And all of a sudden, my liver levels were off the charts. So I think what had happened is that with all the parasites and everything from the tick bites, they love the liver. and
Mm.
it was just so congested that nothing was showing in my blood. And as soon as I did the liver cleansing, it all released
Into the
and was
liver.
showing in the blood. And so it's interesting how, you know, things might not show up in tests, but there can still be something really seriously wrong. And so with the Lyme Disease Association, you know, I was having people that I have gone through all the GPs, all the specialists, had all these crazy wild treatments and months of antibiotics, and they're just managing to get through every day. And so, and then they'd get sent to me. So, and because, you know, they've got nowhere else to go, and they get sent to me, and I'm only in a position where I can provide support. Like, I can't provide medical advice.
And you've only got so many people you can provide support to. Yeah.
Exactly. And so right up until COVID, and part the way through the beginning of COVID, I was still a patient support worker, where I could say, look, you know, this is what I did, and, you know, and I would support them through, psychologically supporting them through, but saying, look, this is what I've done, and I've had a lot of improvement, and I've just, you know, help them feel better and give them hope. And then when the whole COVID thing came, it was like, and because if you research Lyme disease, years ago, apparently they were giving it to people and just watching the outcome. And it was an experiment. And it was originally found on Plum Island near a little town called Lyme in Connecticut. And Plum Island was actually a biowarfare.
Yeah. It's been happening a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were experimenting on this bacteria, which apparently was, you know, got away. And so everything that was happening through COVID, it was like, hang on a minute, I've lived this. It
Mm.
seems like the same thing. And then now people who have long COVID pretty much have a lot of the symptoms of long Lyme disease.
Yep. Yep. It's
And
the same
so
bioweapons that they've
it's,
released and so forth, and then telling people that there's no hope.
yes, yeah.
But there definitely is.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I think this is really kind of a good place to sort of to discuss the fact that you're going to be launching a YouTube channel as well, and a
Not so much YouTube, because all my YouTube videos keep getting pulled down. I've got
the
some up there
ultimate
from 10
censor.
years ago, and like 2 weeks ago, you know, I got another message, you know, your video is misinformation. So I don't think I'll put it on YouTube, but I will be starting a podcast.
Yeah, I'll put it in the description. So
Yes.
on this video, I'll edit it and put it in there, and on the web
Okay.
page, so people will always be able to find it. Hopefully this video won't get taken down. We've been pretty lucky so far.
Good. Yeah, I've
Um,
actually, I got into a bit of overwhelm during COVID, and because, yeah, there was just, I thought there's so many people now who are affected by what's
yeah,
happening.
it's like the phone
And
doesn't stop tinging, does it?
yeah. And but I wasn't doing much sharing anymore. I thought it was actually really good when I saw so many other practitioners and doctors and just everyone talking about all the different treatments and remedies and what was happening. It was like, oh, I don't have to do anything anymore. Not that
It's
I don't
mind blowing,
have to.
isn't it? Really, how far things have come. I mean, when you see these prominent doctors talk about, childhood vaccines being bad and dangerous and not
Yes,
having any benefit, you think, oh well, that's 30 years too late. But like from what we knew, obviously
yes,
longer for people who were in the know years before us. But
yeah,
you think, wow, this is pretty revolutionary.
yes, yeah,
And so I think sometimes when people will say to us, oh, well, how is these things going to end? And we who've been in this for a lot longer can see how far society has shifted in the last 2 years. I mean,
yeah,
it's in 2-3 years significant. It's off the
yeah,
charts. None of us could have predicted
yeah,
how things would go. And I think as needs, what do they say? The mother of invention, necessity is the mother of invention. And I think because there's so many people with such high needs of healing and that it isn't being met by the medical system,
yeah,
I think we're going to see a revolution in health.
Yes.
and not necessarily just in terms of alternative health modalities. I mean, I think those are there and are really good to support people, but ultimately into people's understanding of what health is and self-empowerment. And coming right back to the start of what you said at the start with your midwife saying to you, you've got this.
Yeah.
And to say to the audience, you may not feel like this right now, but the fact that, say, perhaps you even got to the end of this podcast, if you've watched it all, because it's almost going down for like 2 hours.
Yes,
That
yeah.
you have got this, because a lot of people by this stage would have probably tuned out. But if someone has maintained their attention to all this time, to what we've spoken about together today, then you've definitely got it. You've got it. You've got that innate knowledge within yourself of what you need to do to heal.
Absolutely. And it really is incredible how much our body can heal itself. Like, I never would have thought that I'd be doing all the surfing and all the digging and all the things that I do now, because I was in such a bad way, and it really truly is incredible how much our body can heal.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for watching. Thank you, Di, Ellis, for your time today. We'll just round it up today, but people can connect with you through the information we'll share in the webpage.
And
you can,
I've got a little book that I've put
oh
together.
yes, I forgot about that. Yes, and you've got your 12-week protocol. Let's forget. Let's mention that before we go. We still have time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got a little book called Get Well and Thrive. I did write a bigger book of my story, which is called The Beauty Beneath Life and Death. And then I've written a smaller book because I thought I want people who are unwell, like I was, who are really unwell, to just be able to open it up and have the information there that they can go to their naturopath or their doctor and say, look, would this be something, or work it in, just a bit more information that may not have been available. So that's
Like a
called Get Well and
smorgasbord of
Thrive.
ideas and so forth. And also it
Yeah.
encapsulates a long journey. And I think this is the hardest bit, isn't it? How does one, package up a 30-something year journey in a 2-hour podcast? How do you do that? And hopefully we've come to that. And you've got some sort of 12-week protocol, you said at the start. Got to mention that. Yes.
It's basically a 12-week protocol where I step people through the basic foundations of what's helped me to remove the underlying causes of disease and illness and activate my body's own self-healing. And then I also address the emotional aspect. So I have a breathwork session every week where I'm helping people to listen to their body and listen to what they're needing or need to release. So
That's fantastic. I mean, I think too is just connecting with the right energies in our life and positivity people, keeping people within our sphere that are like-minded in this way really changes things. And I love the way that you've done that, and that you are actually participating in this space, because where you're healing a lot of people, even people that you may not actually meet will be touched by what you've shared today.
Oh, hopefully.
Yes. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching. You can find Health Alliance Australia on LinkedIn, and you can join our mailing list on healthallianceaustralia.org. If you want to subscribe to our mailing list to stay in touch, please remember to subscribe, comment and share, distribute this information widely. You never know who it can help. Okay.
Thanks so much, Jenny.